Hello and welcome back. This is ProTaleDev back with another Dungeon Architect video, and what we're going to be looking at is some of the things I've worked on over the last week. This week was actually much more focused on shaders, which is something I haven't really covered or gone over on this channel very much, and it's something I haven't really experimented with. So I got to use that over the week, experiment with it. For now I'll go over the much smaller things before we move on to the shaders. Okay, so if we press play, the first thing I want to show is the actual UI. I've actually changed it to make it look a lot more traditional, like a normal simulator game, where you can see all the resources at the bottom of this bar. So immediately, yeah, we have everything we need at the very bottom. We have our materials, we have our resources. We actually have the star demonstrated in a traditional star bar. We also have the rating as text as well, and of course we got our speed. We've also moved our buttons that were down here that open up the UI menus. So we've got the shop, we've got the character inventory, the potion, the alchemy table, the forge. Of course we've got our grid that we can put on. So they're all still there. We can also see our time that's up here, and it looks a little bit more tidy than it did before. Another thing is that what you can do down here is you have a button which says materials in this section, and if we click this button it'll actually switch to crystals. This is a little bit of a tidier way to show the materials. At the moment they are still in the shop. If I just click this, essentially this is going to be removed, and that way it'll look a little bit more tidier as well, not just tacked on like it was before. So this will be removed, and instead it will be just down here. The next thing I want to show is that this hasn't been applied to every building in my prefabs yet, but currently these buildings that are down here, yeah, if I could just rotate and then zoom in. These buildings that aren't connected to a path now show that they're not connected with this icon above them. Probably a different icon at some point, but for now it's just demonstration. You can see this icon. If I rotate and it connects, you can see that it now shows no icon. If I change it again to disconnect it, there is an icon. So this is just a quick way of knowing if it's connected or not for the player. And again, these aren't set up yet, the other buildings aren't set up, but the functionality is there. I just need to implement it onto all my other prefabs. Once again, I did show as well that I can now rotate buildings. So now when the icon is on there, it's not just the icon, we can also rotate all of these buildings, and the rotation has been applied on all of the buildings as well. So you can do it, it's no longer an issue. This was an easy thing to change, so it's no longer a big issue. And it's just gone nighttime, so a quick mention as well that there is now lighting coming from the houses, a little bit brighter from the selection point, as well as the NPCs have lights now, and the shop has lights. Just to add a little bit more to the environment at nighttime. The next most obvious thing is that the island is now much smaller. So what I've done is I've actually lowered the island by 2. The reason why I've lowered it is because it didn't seem necessary, at least for the starter island, to really have multi-layered in the beginning. I'll probably, like I said, I'll expand this on other levels with multiple levels, but for now, just the basic level is probably fine. Just having it lower down to the water makes it seem a much smaller island than it was, and it's kind of what I wanted. The next thing is that there is like this cylinder that I've placed floating around. This is just to simulate a boat arriving at the docks. There's also like a little building here, and that's just so you don't see the NPCs just appear out of nowhere. It looks a bit nicer, I think, a little bit more natural. This cylinder is supposed to be a boat that's arriving. I don't have a model for a boat, so I just put this here, and it's animated so it'll float away and then come back. The next thing is that this wasn't working, but now it is. We can now place custom dungeons with a path as well, so they can travel to it. So if I just quickly give myself a ton of money, and then just quickly create an area, let's just zoom in a little bit, rotate that a little bit, and then zoom in. Let's just build it here somewhere, I don't know. Okay, and so when I want to place this dungeon down, what I can do is I can just place it on here, And then you can see that we actually have a path now that's leading to the center. It's a little bit smaller because I think it was a little bit too big as it was before. But what we can do is we can rotate it. So once it's been rotated, you'll see that NPCs will be able to go to it. Just waiting for this guy to come over, and there you go. You can see that he enters it. It can come to this custom dungeon, and so now you can see that the custom dungeon is working and they can head to it. Okay, so the next thing is the shaders. So I spent most of the week pretty much looking at shaders. The things I've just talked about were really small things that I did very quickly. The shaders, however, it took me a long time because I don't really have time to use shaders very often. And shaders are a big part of games, especially these days. Shaders are pretty much part of any kind of effect that you see. But shaders are a really big part of games, and honestly I should get better at using shaders, and so I figured I would bring shaders into this to see what I could do. I ended up having to look, like I said, I'm not very familiar with shaders, so I had to go and research. Not ashamed to admit that I just don't know a whole lot about shaders at the moment. That doesn't mean I can't learn. So what I did was I looked up a bunch of videos about shaders to try and create my own unique water or different types of water to see what worked and to really see if I could create something unique for my game that would look right. I ended up with this water which I really like. It's kind of glistening, it's nice, it's calm. It reminds me of like a tropical island to a degree, and that's exactly what I kind of wanted, is just this calm sort of effect. I do eventually want it to be maybe much more dangerous looking, especially when we're looking at the disasters, and that's something I'll be able to do a little bit later. But essentially I want to make them either the water just level just rise, like I mentioned in the last video, or make actual waves. Let's actually take a look at the shader itself. So I tried a few different things. I tried to create a bunch of fractal water and fractured effects, like these ripple effects, and they didn't really work. And I tried different kind of effects to get what I wanted, but ultimately I settled for this, which is a much more standard specific one. And then I kind of edited it out and changed it to how I wanted the effect to be. So this ripple effect actually ended up being, I believe it's from Bracky's. I think it's one of his videos that I started watching, and he had this kind of effect, and which I believe it was this section here. And so I decided to incorporate that kind of idea of this fractal, because before that I just had a plain subsurface of colors that would change depending on the depth and the movement. It looked a bit weird though, and it didn't really remind me of ocean water in a sense, or tropical water or anything like that. So it didn't really work. I also tried to have built-in shadows into the water to see if I could create that kind of shimmer effect, but it didn't really work either. So I ended up going with this. I then edited this idea of just having this effect coming over and changed it to add in a bit more of a depth for foam, because I wanted foam to be an effect that would be on the edges of things. So I added this in to try and increase the effect. I then tried to incorporate some patterns, which worked very well. This is just the movement, the wave movement and patterns. I'm actually going to include another section which is the waves aggressive aspect, but this is going to be for the ocean. So we can edit this inside our material editor because they're all exposed variables, so we can change them however we like. And honestly, I think I'm really happy with how it is. I will probably, like I said, I just want it to have a more aggressive water for when there's like disasters, but for now I think it's fine. The next thing I worked on, which is more recent, was clouds. So I had a cloud shader that I was building on. The problem is that I realized that by having clouds, it would just obscure the camera when I'm playing. So if I go into play here and I just zoom all the way out, so I had these clouds, but it was kind of very irritating for the player if you're zoomed all the way out, because all you'd see is clouds. And if you're trying to navigate to say another island, let's say over here, unfortunately you would just see clouds, and it could be just a really irritating obstruction. Some games differ from how they handle that kind of thing. Sometimes they'll fade the object out slightly or make it transparent. I don't really want to do that. I don't want to have there be a distraction for the player, so I've decided to leave it as this. But that gave me thinking to other games that use shadows. To demonstrate that there are clouds, they would use shadows to do this, and so I tried that in different options. I tried different shaders to try and see how I could do it. Ultimately I didn't get the result I wanted, so I tried something much more simple, which was just to add in some clouds manually. I just go down here. So as you can see, I've got these like two clouds here. One of the shaders is broken materials that I was working on, but essentially to have a physical cloud just around that's more blocky, which is more traditional into the setting of our island. However, again, I have the same issue, which is it just was very distracting when you rotate the camera around. The next method I tried was I wanted to create shadows. So forget the clouds, let's actually create just straight shadows. This has been done in games as well to simulate that there are clouds even when there aren't any. And essentially this is just animated PNGs, which is a very cheap way of doing it. They're not done very well. I just wanted to test it to see how it might look. So they're not done very well. However, you can see here that I tried to create an idea of what clouds could be. It's pretty rushed and pretty this is the last thing I did, so it's pretty rushed. I'm not really sure if I like the idea of clouds now that I'm looking at it and now getting an idea of what it could be, but I've not found a way to separate them so that certain objects have a soft shadow as opposed to a hard shadow. But even with a soft shadow, I think it wouldn't really give the effect I want. And so I've decided that I'm probably going to just get rid of shadows altogether, leave it as it is, then try and see if I can just run it as it is. As you can see, it's just very dark, the shadow. You know, you never really know if something's going to work until you try it out. Oh, I've just remembered that another quick mention is that last time I didn't show off any dungeons and their rooms. That's because they weren't finished. I've worked on them a little bit more, but they're very simple rooms. They're not actually done completely yet. But a friend of mine mentioned it, why I haven't shown any of the dungeons, and so this is it. Essentially, I've done the very basics of a room, but they're not filled out yet, they're not complete, and there's still a lot of the dungeon aspect that needs to be done. I'm trying to I've decided that I'm trying to get the overworld, the island, complete first, because a lot of the time the player will spend on that island aspect, trying to build it out and earn gold that way. The dungeon will come into it when it's really a custom one, and I will have the option for the player to be able to go into a normal dungeon, not just a custom dungeon, but it'll be a pre-built one that the player will have to go in that I've built, not the player can build. But the only way the player can enter it is by something like a fighter guild or an adventurer guild or something like that. But for now, that's going to be a separate thing. At the moment, yeah, I'm just focusing on the overworld, the over island that the player is going to be spending a lot of time on, just to build out the economy and things. That's going to be the main thing I'm working on. Oh, I also had to play around with making a custom shader for the skybox. It's right here. It's very simple. There's nothing to it yet. I haven't really built it out. So I do need to play around with it a bit more. However, at the moment, I think it might be more easier to just create a custom box cube skybox, handmade, essentially drawn in, so that I can have islands in the background and have sort of like a hand-painted cloud aspect to it. Okay, so next time what we're going to be looking at is finishing off all the buildings in terms of, you know, the connection, and also trying to make it so that lighting is done for all of them. Essentially getting them all working, as well as the production. I haven't shown the production buildings because I haven't finished them yet, and so I'm going to be showing them hopefully next week. And then I'll be hopefully done with the basic lighting for all the buildings and stuff like that. That's the very basics. After that, I'll also be getting the mechanics for monsters coming out of the dungeon, hopefully started working on that as well. So this has been ProTaleDev, and I'll see you next time.